Chapter 996. Fortunately, no one recognized Demonis. Otherwise, based on her popularity, all the racers who loved racing would have screamed and screamed in surprise. The once famous racer, Demonis, had already retired from the scene. When Demonis became a racer, she had just started running Rongyao Company. Every racer wanted to race with Demonis, but there were only a handful of racers who could race with her. Those who had raced with Demonis before would never have the chance to race with her again. Even so, there were still countless people who wanted to race against the famous Demonis. However, there was one exception. Whenever that person appeared, Demonis would definitely race with her until the end. After hundreds and thousands of races, both of them were never tired. Apart from that person, Demonis had never invited anyone else to race with her. That was why Dan Tiansheng and the rest were stunned. However, no one had ever seen the person who was qualified to race with Demonis hundreds and thousands of times. They only knew that the person had long hair and was a woman. However, every time that person appeared in front of everyone, she wore a mask, revealing only a pair of big black eyes. No one knew who she was. They only knew that she was Demonis' regular racer teammate. Demonis would be wherever she was. The most mysterious thing was that the person's racing skills were even better than Demonis. They were not on the same level. For such a legendary person, the people in the industry only knew about her long hair. Another thing was that Demonis called her SS. After SS became popular on the racing track, countless paparazzi and reporters tried to dig up her background. However, their efforts were to no avail. No one knew who SS was. However, in the racing industry, countless racing fans regarded SS as their idol. Demonis retired from the racing industry after SS' disappearance. At that time, countless racing fans were thoroughly disappointed. However, the people in the industry could not figure it out no matter how hard they racked their brains. That was to piece the two English words together and find a Chinese font that existed on the international leaderboard. Slaying God. Demonis had been out of the racing circle for a long time, so when Demonis stood up and turned to look at Yun Jian, personally inviting Yun Jian to race, Dan Tianqing's back straightened. Gu Xian's eyes lit up. He was terrified and panicked because other than the legendary SS, no one else had ever been invited by the witch. But what if Dan Tiansheng and Gu Xian believed that Yun Jian was an SS? How was this possible? This must be a coincidence. Perhaps it was because Yun Jian was really outstanding? Good. We haven't had a match for 2 years. Let's have a good time today. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and smiled. Originally, Yun Jian did not plan to race. She came to Country M to see the situation of Rongyao Company. She was, after all, the chairman of Rongyao Company. Now that she had handed the Rongyao Company over to that Demonis, she could not just ignore it. 2 years. Wait, the SS who raced with Demonis had also gone missing 2 years ago. Demonis had not raced since then. There were only a handful of people who had raced with Demonis. If that was the case, then Yun Jian who had raced with Demonis. Isn't that the legendary SS that even the Demonis couldn't compete with? But how was that possible? Yun Jian was an SS? This. Chapter 997. While Dan Tiansheng and the others were thinking about it, Yun Jian and Alluring which had already hopped nimbly from the spectator stand to the flat ground. Yun Jian's agility and dexterity gave Dan Tiansheng and the others a shock. Dan Tiansheng had even forgotten that he was going to participate in the racing competition. Xiao Xian, who's your younger sister? She even knows Rongyao Company's CEO. Moreover, from the way she jumped down from the stairs just now, it seems that her skills aren't bad. Dan Tiansheng sighed deeply and then said with a pout. What are you thinking? No matter who she is, she's my younger sister. Gu Xian said after rapping his buddy Dan Tiansheng's head. Gu Xian paused for a beat before continuing. Xiao Jian is an amazing girl indeed. She's an advanced special forces soldier in my dad's military now. Dan Tiansheng was not from Longmen City nor Zhe Province but he was from Country Z. He did not know much about the military, nor did he know anything about Team Monarch. However, Dan Tiansheng knew one thing. Advanced special forces soldiers. Those who could become advanced special forces soldiers were undoubtedly the best of the best. Therefore, when Gu Xian finished speaking, Dan Tiansheng had already gone up to Gu Xian and wrapped his arm around Gu Xian's shoulder, exclaiming in shock and confusion. What? Advanced Special Forces soldier? Your younger sister? F***CK. As Dan Tianxing said this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he reacted. You're amazing, Xiao Xian. You even found yourself an advanced Special Forces soldier's younger sister. Your sister is actually a member of the Advanced Special Forces. Just as Dan Tianxing was speaking up to this point, Dan Tianxing's expression changed. Gu Xian reached out his hand and pulled off his buddy Dan Tianxing's hand from his shoulder. Just as he was about to reply to Dan Tianxing, he heard a voice coming from the radio. Brother Dan Tianxing. Oh my god, it's Rongyao Company's CEO who retired from racing earlier. Alluring demon. You're back in racing? Am I seeing things? Normally, the host of this international racing competition would be mature and steady. But when he heard the exclamations coming from the broadcast, it wasn't hard to see how shocking the return of Demoness to the racing circle was. The shocked voice that came from the broadcast was a female voice. Because of the return of the demonic woman, the voice sounded very shocked at this moment. However, not long after this woman's voice sounded, a man snatched the woman's loudspeaker. Then, the passionate and bold voice of another host could be heard. After 2 years, our top racer, Siren, the president of Rongyao Company, has returned to the racing circle. Next, we'll be competing with our top racer, Demoness, against a young girl from Z country who calls herself Yun Jian. Let's give them a warm welcome. The male and female hosts were both from the United States, and they spoke in English. Of course, whether it was Yun Jian, Siren, or Gu Xian and Dan Tianxing, who had lived in Country M for a long time, English was not a problem at all. The hosts were obviously using Demoness to hype things up. The atmosphere in the venue was not very lively at first, but when the host said that, the tens of thousands of people sitting in the spectator stands screamed when they heard that the top racer, Demoness, had returned. Chapter 998. Oh my god! Temptress is back in the racing circle. Am I seeing things? Ah, I'm her #1 fan. In the spectator stands, there were already people who gripped their companions' shoulders in excitement and shook them with guffaws. Temptress is back. The atmosphere reached its climax in an instant. Of course, other than Temptress, there were also people talking about Yun Jian. Who's that girl who calls herself Yun Jian? What right does she have to compete with Temptress? Other than SS back then, I'm not convinced by anyone. Yeah. Who's that girl called Yun Jian? How dare she compete with Lord Temptress of the racing circle? Get out of the racing circle. That's right, Yun Jian. Get out of the racing circle. After the voices of reverence for the Demoness rang out, another voice soon reached the peak. It meant that Yun Jian should get out of the racing circle. Ever since the match between SS and Temptress, any racer who competed with Temptress would be scolded by the fans of the two teams, telling them to get out of the racing circle, saying that they were unworthy of being a racer. Wait a minute, for example, this kind of sound was like the wind and clouds were surging. At the moment, Yun Jian, who was spurned and asked to leave the racing circle by the audience, was wearing a helmet to prevent accidents. The helmet could save a racer's life in some accidents, so the regular racing channels would usually let the racers wear it. Sister Jian, go easy on me later. I haven't played this game for 2 years, but don't let me lose too badly. At least give me some face. Ha! Temptress winked coquettishly at Yun Jian and teased with a chuckle. Tonight's racing competition was international, so the organizers would provide their own sports cars. Of course, the quality of the sports cars provided by the organizers would not be bad. To be fair, the 2 sports cars provided by the organizers were of the same brand and model. In other words, the racers could only win with their own skills. Let's rely on our own abilities, Yun Jian said with a slight smile. Haha, we can go to the starting track and get ready. Siren wasn't angry. She laughed heartily and drove the Bentley sports car provided by the organizers with Yun Jian. They slowly drove from the inspection station to the track. It wasn't until Yun Jian and the demonic woman drove out of the inspection station that some of the staff members standing in the same place began to discuss with disdain. TSK, who does that girl think she is? Let's just rely on our own abilities. Did she really think that she could win against the Demoness? Does she think she's an SS? Demoness is just giving her some face. She really thinks she's a divine racer. Can she beat Demoness? This is simply daydreaming. Just as the crew members were discussing Yun Jian and Alluring Witch, They saw two Bentley sports cars stomping on the accelerator and speeding away from the starting point on the other side of the track with the referee's gunshot. If one wanted to distinguish which Bentley was in which Yun Jian was sitting, one only needed to look at the color of the car. Yun Jian's car was black while Seductress's was silver-gray. Just as they sped out of the starting point, Seductress' silver-gray sports car was one step ahead of Yun Jian. Seeing this, the staff members who were talking about Yun Jian's arrogance grew even more excited. However, the discussion stopped abruptly midway. In the next second, the staff members were so shocked that their jaws dropped. Chapter 999. Before Yun Jian and Seductress stepped on the accelerator and the car sped away, the people in the spectator stands were almost going crazy. Such voices could be said to have penetrated the whole venue. Seductress will win. Yun Jian, get out of the racing circle. Faced with such aggressive voices, Guxian, who was still standing in place, and Shan Tianxing, who was still standing in place and had not yet prepared for the race, looked at the scene in front of them with a terrible expression. After all, Yun Jian was with them. Especially Guxian. Guxian had already regarded Yun Jian as his own sister. When he suddenly heard Yun Jian being cursed by everyone present, Guxian's expression was the worst. His own sister was being cursed and asked to get out of the racing circle. As her brother, he certainly felt bad. In addition to this, Guxian was also very worried about Yun Jian. After all, Seductress was once the king of the racing circle. It could be said that except for the legendary SS, Seductress had never lost to anyone. Therefore, under such circumstances, it was normal for Guxian to be worried. Yun Jian's racing skills were amazing, and Guxian had already experienced it. But compared to Seductress, at this moment, the two Bentleys driven by Yun Jian and Seductress had already sped out of the finish line. Almost at the same time, Seductress' silver-gray Bentley took the lead and rushed out of the starting point. As a result, the screams in the venue became even more obvious. Ah! Seductress will win. Yun Jian, get out of the racing circle. Guxian's hands were tightly clenched together. Listening to the people around him belittling Yun Jian with such words, as her brother, he was really. For the first time, Guxian felt powerless. When Guxian lowered his head and raised it slightly, a frightening scene suddenly appeared in the eyes of everyone present. The two sports cars had arrived at the turning point one after the other. However, just as the two sports cars reached the turning point, the black Bentley that was lagging behind suddenly made a sharp turn. In the next second, it stepped on the accelerator just as the silver-gray sports car driven by the demoness in front of it began to brake. It was usually unrealistic to overtake on a curve because it was very dangerous. Even when driving, it was very dangerous to overtake on a curve. Moreover, when racing, almost all of them were sprinting at full speed. When they encountered a curve, not only did they not step on the brakes, they even had to step on the accelerator to speed forward. Such a person was simply one of a kind. However, Yun Jian was one of them. It was also this crazy action that made countless audience members hold onto the railing tightly and raise their butts slightly. They widened their eyes and looked at this scene in shock and horror. Did she not want to live anymore? Chi! When they reached the curve, the black Bentley driven by Yun Jian stepped on the accelerator like a flash of lightning. In the shortest time, the car used the highest speed to fiercely overtake the silver-gray Bentley that had slowed down. After overtaking the silver-gray Bentley, the black Bentley driven by Yun Jian turned a corner and finally disappeared from everyone's sight. However, it appeared on the large screen in the spectator stands. Silence. There was a deathly silence. Soon after, there were screams from the audience that were boiling with excitement. Oh my God! She actually overtook Demoness? How is this possible? Other than SS, Demoness has never been overtaken, but today she actually. The voices that were cursing Yun Jian to get out of the racing circle suddenly disappeared. What followed was a shocking scream. At this moment, whether it was the group of staff members who had mocked Yun Jian, Dan Tianxing, Guxian, all the audience in the spectator stands, or the racers in the lounge, all of them widened their eyes. This scene was almost unbelievable. Chapter 1000. In spite of it, Yun Jian was already driving the black Bentley sports car ahead of alluring which by leaps and bounds while the crowd was howling with excitement. But Little Demon was not to be outdone. After Yun Jian took a huge lead, she stepped on the accelerator to catch up. At this moment, Little Demon had a very wild feeling. She felt that she had found her initial joy and passion for racing. Sure enough, racing with an SS car was the most exciting. There was no other. Little Demon was full of passion at this moment. The audience in the spectator stands were so enthusiastic that they could not control themselves. Although alluring Demoness and Yunjian's race was interrupted midway, none of the racers objected when they saw alluring Demoness making a comeback. But the scene that no one expected was that Yunjian actually took a huge lead in the beginning of the race. Furthermore, this was under the circumstance that the Demoness had rushed out of the starting point first. Gu Xian saw that Yunjian had overtaken Little Demon. It was as if he had seen hope. At this moment, Gu Xian's heart was filled with excitement. Yunjian will win. Yunjian will win. Gu Xian looked at the battle in front of him and shouted unconsciously. After shouting twice, Gu Xian realized that no one around him was paying attention to him. Even when they heard his voice, the people around him glanced at him coldly. But Gu Xian did not stop shouting. He elbowed Dan Tianxing in the stomach and then forced Dan Tianxing to shout with him. The strength of a few people could sometimes drive the whole audience. Gu Xian's shouting also stirred up the atmosphere. Gradually, when they saw that Yunjian had overtaken Little Demon, some people also shouted with Gu Xian. For a moment, the audience in the spectator stands were divided into two factions. The audience was shouting and screaming at the same time. The atmosphere had reached its climax. However, at this moment, someone pointed at the screen and shouted loudly, "Look! There!" This person's voice was quickly drowned out by the shouts of the audience in the spectator stands. However, everyone present saw a scene that scared them out of their wits. At this time, the sports car driven by Yunjian and the witch was about to reach the finish line. Although Siren was not as fast as Yunjian, she followed closely behind Yunjian's black Bentley. Seeing that the seductive woman's sports car was about to overtake Yunjian's sports car in terms of speed, just as the audience's hearts were tightly clenched and their blood was boiling. However, the black Bentley suddenly stepped on the brakes. The sports car was originally moving at a terrifying speed of over 200 kilometers per hour. If he suddenly slammed on the brakes, the car and the people inside would be forcefully braked by the inertia and be sent flying. "Is she crazy?" a member of the audience yelled in horror. At this moment, a shocking turn of events suddenly occurred. The moment the car braked, the black Bentley began to slide to the left. At the same time, due to inertia, it spun and slid crazily. It spun twice as fast as the original speed of the sports car, and was flung away. With this toss, the hearts of everyone present almost fell out. Was he going to screw up? Everyone present could not help but think so. However, just as they thought so, they saw the black Bentley driven by Yunjian bounce to the finish line at the speed of a spring after being flung away. When it reached the finish line, the black Bentley spun a few times on the spot and suddenly came to a stop. Yunjian won. Siren reached the finish line 10 seconds later than Yunjian. However, at this moment, no cheers could be heard. The people present could no longer express their inner feelings with the word shock. Why did the way the black Bentley used just now feel so familiar? SS. I've seen that move in SS car before. She's SS, she's SS. Someone suddenly reacted and pointed out the mystery. Hearing this person's words, everyone present stood up in fright. Yunjian was actually SS. Chapter 1001. Those who had looked down on Yunjian, including those who had insulted Yunjian and demanded that Yunjian get out of the racing circle when they heard about the race between Yunjian and Siren. Those who had checked the station and said that Yunjian was daydreaming if she thought she could beat Siren. Gu Xian, Dan Tianxing, and the others. Everyone's eyes widened in horror as they stared at the scene in front of them in astonishment. The whole place was silent. Everyone had the same expression on their faces. Stunned, stunned. At this moment, no one's expression was normal. Especially those who had looked down on Yunjian. They were all dumbfounded. Were they seeing things? The girl who looked like she was under 18 years old was actually SS. But at this moment, they had no choice but to believe it. Today was an international racing competition, and the people who came were all racing fans who had watched countless races. Many of the spectators were fans who had watched the SS race back in the day, and they were familiar with the SS driving skills. Wasn't Yunjian's move the same as SS' usual move during the final sprint? As racing fans, they couldn't be wrong. After a moment of silence, the crowd began to roar and seethe. SS' appearance was even more shocking than the return of the top racer, Siren. And the most shocking thing of the day was that SS, who had been famous in the racing circle but had never shown her face, was actually a young girl. But if SS was so young now, then 2 years ago, how old was she? 13? 14? Oh my God! Everyone present was so shocked by this that they almost stopped breathing. At this moment, the driver's seat of the black Bentley parked at the finish line opened. Yoon Jien's flawless face appeared in front of the crowd's eyes. On the grandstand, someone led the crowd to shout at the top of their lungs. The atmosphere was 100 times hotter than before. Yoon Jien frowned slightly when she heard the orderly cheers. Her delicate face made people feel even more excited. Not long after, the Demoness silver-gray Bentley also braked at the finish line. She got out of the silver-gray Bentley in a rather handsome manner. Then, she swung the car door and closed it. The demonic woman laughed bluntly before she walked up to Yoon Jien. She reached out her hand and stroked her hairline. Then, she said to Yoon Jien as she walked, "Sister Jien, your driving skills are still amazing even after 2 years of absence. Haha. You've improved." Yoon Jien narrowed her eyes and commented. Yoon Jien never flattered people, but whatever came out of her mouth was definitely the truest words. The Demoness driving skills had indeed improved. If it was 2 years ago, she would have been left far behind. Of course. Demoness was not bashful from Yoon Jien's compliment. Instead, she admitted it openly. As they spoke, Yoon Jien and Alluring Witch walked out of the racetrack side by side. Just as they exited the track, a large group of reporters who had already brought their cameras swarmed toward them, all of them dashing toward Yoon Jien. "Hello. May I ask if you're SS who suddenly disappeared 2 years ago? Do you know that Demoness disappeared from the racing scene after you disappeared? Can you explain why you left the racing scene back then? May I ask if you'll make a comeback? Why didn't you show your real face before?" Chapter 1002. The reporters were like a swarm of bees. If they were not held back by the organizer's security guards, they would have probably pounced on Yoon Jien and interrogated her with all sorts of questions. It was fortunate that an international racing competition like this had people from the organizer's side keeping these terrifying reporters in check. After all, these reporters were quite fearsome in order to get first-hand headlines. In the past, any racer who was slightly famous in the international racing competition would be swarmed by these fearsome reporters. Therefore, to control the reporters as much as possible, the organizer had sent security guards to stop them. In spite of it, there were just too many reporters. Even with the security guards deployed, they could not stop all of them. The venue was in a state of chaos, but to Yoon Jien, it was as if nothing had happened. She merely squinted her eyes. Hello. Can you please answer my question? Will you reappear in the racing circle as SS? Excuse me. If the people who were yelling for Yoon Jien to get out of the racing circle at the spectator stands were intense in their tone, these reporters were 100 times more frenzied than them. "Sister Jien, let's leave from the back door of the racetrack." Alluring Demon went up to Yoon Jien and told Yoon Jien softly with a nod. "Amen." Yoon Jien nodded and answered Alluring Demon. "Sis, are you leaving? You'll return to the racing circle, right?" The reporters panicked when they saw Yoon Jien turn around without saying a word. Yoon Jien ignored them and turned slightly to the side. After a pause, she turned around again to show the reporters her back. The corners of her beautiful lips curled up slightly, and a bright light flashed through her eyes. In the next second, her melodious voice rang out. "I'll only answer one question." Yoon Jien paused for a beat before her voice trailed off. "What does it have to do with you whether I race or not? Are you my parents or my parents? Why are you so nosy?" Yoon Jien's words were not polite at all. The reporters at the scene originally thought that Yoon Jien could really answer a decent question. But Yoon Jien's words meant. Wasn't she indirectly saying that the reporters were meddling in other people's business? Although Yoon Jien's words didn't sound elegant at all, the racers in the distance almost couldn't help clapping and cheering when they heard her. This group of racers was usually afraid of being chased by reporters, but standing in a group of reporters, although they were very disgusted by the reporters' questions, they couldn't fly into a rage. However, Yoon Jien's actions had completely vented everyone's anger. Seeing Yoon Jien turn around and walk away after saying this, the group of reporters froze in place and surprisingly did not chase after her. The reporters who were standing still saw the look in Yun Jian's eyes and were a little shocked at the moment. That young girl's eyes could be so cold. It was as if they dared to chase after her, they would immediately die on the spot. After receiving Yun Jian's cold glare, the reporters all stood still in a daze and didn't chase after her. The people in the spectator stands were stunned. Everyone was dumbfounded. One had to know that when a racer finished a race, this group of reporters would chase after the racer like crazy in order to get first-hand news. Chapter 1003. While the reporters were dumbfounded and too scared to follow them, Yun Jian was already led away by Temptress through the back door of the racetrack. Haha, those damn reporters kept pestering you, Sister Jian. They're usually pestering me, but Sister Jian, your gaze just now must have scared them to death. Just as Temptress led Yun Jian out of the racetrack's back door and came to a flat area illuminated only by a single light, she guffawed loudly. This did not match Temptress's seductive image at all. Temptress was seductive, but her seductive image was only shown to outsiders. She was never strict with Yun Jian. Yun Jian gave a curt nod, but it was obvious from the slight curvature that she was replying to Temptress. Yun Jian had always been one to speak her mind. Honestly, it was a headache for her to face the reporters. It was fine if she did not say anything, but once she did, the reporters would back off. Sis. Just as Yun Jian and Temptress arrived at the racetrack's entrance, a male voice rang out. They were at the racetrack's entrance and the loud cheers from the spectator stands could be heard from here. It could be seen that another exciting racing performance was about to begin. It was not as intense as Yun Jian and Temptress race, but the atmosphere on the spectator stands was already boiling. In comparison, the racetrack's entrance seemed a little lonely. There was only one spot of light that shone down, making it feel a little desolate. In spite of it, Yun Jian did not find it desolate. She tilted her head slightly toward the source of the voice and saw Guxian waving toward them. There were a few buddies from Guxian with him as well. Dan Tianxing was the leader. It was almost Dan Tianxing's race, but he seemed to be more excited to see Yun Jian than the race. When Yun Jian heard Guxian's voice, she stopped in her tracks. When Temptress saw Yun Jian stop, she stopped as well. Phew! Yun Jian, you... Dan Tianxing was still panting when he ran over. He took a deep breath to adjust his emotions. Yun Jian, are you really SS? Dan Tianxing finally asked the question that Guxian and the rest wanted to ask. Just as he asked the question, however, Dan Tianxing paused and said, "No, I don't mean anything else. It's because I admire Temptress and SS very much, so..." "I am," Yun Jian answered naturally. Yun Jian did not answer whether she was SS or not when she was interviewed. Dan Tianxing and the others chased after her was to ask for an answer. Yes or no? Although Dan Tianxing and the rest were prepared, they were still stunned at this moment. Guxian put his arm around Dan Tianxing's shoulder naturally and said in a boastful manner, "Of course, I finally know why Master Corentin calls Sister S. And why Master Corentin wants Sister to be his disciple." "What? Master Corentin? Little Xian, are you talking about the world's most famous top-notch mechanic, Master Corentin?" Master Corentin wants to be Yun Jian's disciple? This. Chapter 1004. Corentin was also well known in the racing circle. What was that supposed to mean? Corentin did not race, but why was he so famous in the racing circle? It was because Corentin's modified racing car was the best in the world. Any racer would have a grand goal or wish, which was to get a sports car modified by Master Corentin. Therefore, Corentin was famous in the racing circle. Moreover, Corentin had a quirk that everyone in the industry knew. It was impossible to get a sports car modified by Master Corentin even if you had the money. It also depended on his mood. If he was in a bad mood or did not like you, he would not modify you even if it cost him his life. This was mentioned before. Of course, the reason Corentin could be so arrogant was because he had his own skills. He had the capital to be so arrogant and brash. Therefore, when they heard that someone like him was begging to be Yun Jian's disciple, Shan Tianxing and the rest were shocked and fearful. Ha! That old man Corentin is still begging to be Sister Jian's disciple? To Shan Tianxing and the rest, Corentin's begging to be Yun Jian's disciple was terrifying, but alluring demon was only impressed by his perseverance. As for Corentin wanting to be Yun Jian's disciple, it was just a normal thing. Sister Jian, that old man still hasn't given up. Are you going to take him in? A luring demon crossed her arms lazily and looked at Yun Jian with a grin, her eyes twinkling with a peculiar glint. No, Yun Jian retorted. Shan Tiansheng and the rest shuddered again when they heard Yun Jian's straightforward rejection. That was the internationally renowned mechanic, Master Corentin. If it were any of Dan Tianxing's men, they would be very satisfied if Master Corentin were to meet them, let alone acknowledge them as his master. What about Yun Jian? Why? Yun Jian, why didn't you take Master Corentin in? If Yun Jian took Master Corentin as her disciple, would it not be a piece of cake for him to modify a sports car? Dan Tianxing asked in confusion. Because. Yun Jian tilted her head and looked at Dan Tianxing. She narrowed her eyes slightly, and there was a beautiful luster in her eyes that no one could underestimate. Because he's not qualified. In the next second, Yun Jian's soft voice rang out. When this voice rang out, Dan Tianxing and the others were completely stunned. What did he mean by Master Corentin wasn't qualified? If even Master Corentin wasn't qualified, then who else in the world was? However, after Yun Jian finished speaking, she smiled faintly, turned sideways and took a step forward. Little Xian Xian, your sister is an SS, the king of the racing circle. That's true, but Master Corentin's strength isn't just for show. For her to speak of Master Corentin like that, isn't it a little? Dan Tianxing said hesitantly. Little brother, you're really flattering that old man Corentin. He's nothing to Sister Jian. Temptress winked at Dan Tianxing and the others before she followed Yun Jian with a chuckle. What Temptress said surprised Dan Tianxing and the others. That was not the end of it. When Gu Xian heard that, he could not help stepping up to tell his buddy, Dan Tianxing. Tianxing, I used to think that Master Corentin was the best mechanic in the world, but ever since I drove the Ferrari sports car my sister modified, The Ferrari sports car my sister modified is twice as fast as Master Corentin's modified sports car. Master Corentin's modified sports car was originally twice as fast as a regular sports car. That was already the limit. However, a mechanic who could double the speed of Master Corentin's modified sports car. There was probably no one else in the world who could do that. Just as they reached this part of their conversation, they were either hinting or comforting themselves that it was just a coincidence that Demonis was following Yun Jian. However, they heard Demonis speaking to Yun Jian from afar. Sister Jian, the company's going downhill right now because of Hoggy Company's suppression. The rest of the words did not register in the female staff members who stood at the same spot. However, the few female staff members present heard the two words. Sister Jian? The CEO of Rongyao Company was calling the girl's sister? What did this mean? Did it mean that the girl's status was higher than Demonis? Chapter 1006. Suddenly thinking of this, several female staff members suddenly covered their mouths and looked at Yun Jian's fading figure in disbelief. Oh my god, could she be? Could she be the legendary founder of the Rongyao Company, the chairman of the Rongyao Company? Since the establishment of the Rongyao Company, the chairman of the Rongyao Company had never shown his face. So when they heard Demonis call Yun Jian's sister, the group of female staff members guessed it. The expression of the people present could not be described with the word, frightened. They seemed to have seen the founder of the Rongyao Company, the legendary chairman. For a moment, the group of female staff members even forgot that they were secretly criticizing Yun Jian and despising Yun Jian in their hearts. At this moment, Yun Jian and Demonis had already taken the elevator to the office on the 25th floor. The 25th floor was where the offices of all the executives of the Rongyao Company were located. Demonis' office was also on the 25th floor. As soon as they came out of the elevator, Demonis took Yun Jian directly to her office. After hearing Demonis say that the company's development was going downhill recently, Yun Jian was neither happy nor worried. She asked faintly, Hoggy Company? Yes, Hoggy Company is also one of the top 10 international companies. But Hoggy Company's international status is slightly higher than our Rongyao Company. The reason is because Hoggy Company is a company passed down from ancient times. After thousands of years of business development, its foundation is deeply rooted. Recently, the chairman of Hoggy Company has been suppressing us, so the company's sales have been greatly reduced recently. Demoness was not vague at all when talking about serious matters. She explained to Yunjian word by word. However, just as she said this, Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Because at this moment, Yunjian and Demoness had already arrived at the door of Demoness' office. Yunjian, on the other hand, saw two figures in a luring demon's office. When Demoness saw the two figures, one standing and one sitting in her office, she frowned deeply. Yunjian raised her eyebrows slightly. Under normal circumstances, Rongyao Company had guards at the door, so outsiders could not enter. However, it was almost midnight now, and basically everyone in the company had gotten off work, except for some people who were still working overtime. Therefore, there were no guards outside the door, and there were still people in the company. The door was open, so it was not strange that someone could enter. However, the strange thing was that this person actually found Demoness' office. Mayor! Demoness frowned and said in astonishment. Once Yunjian heard a luring witch's shout, she knew who the two people in the office, one standing and one sitting, were. The man standing was Mayor, the chairman of Xueqi Company. The woman sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed was Mel's sister, Maggie. Xueqi Company was the company that had been suppressing Rongyao Company recently. At least now that Rongyao Company was in Demoness' hands, she could not compete with Xueqi Company. Haha, my little Demoness, I finally caught you. Mayor glanced at Yunjian, then turned to look at Demoness and said generously, "What are you doing here? Aren't you afraid that I will kill you?" Demoness glared at Mayor fiercely. In fact, based on the current situation, Demoness, as the chairman of Rongyao Company, was being suppressed by Xueqi Company. Mayor was Demoness' strongest opponent. However, Mayor was amused and laughed. His handsome face added a trace of the CEO's dignified demeanor. "Of course we are here to laugh at you." My NI raised her head arrogantly and looked at Demoness. My NI glanced at Demoness, then glanced at Yunjian. Seeing that Yunjian was wearing clothes from a street stall, she laughed for a while, then mocked her. Chapter 1007. Yunjian did not plan to speak, but she merely raised a brow when the topic shifted to her. Xueqi Company was one of the top 10 international corporations, and its international status was incomparable to ordinary companies. In fact, Xueqi Company and Rongyao Company existed side by side. The only difference was that Rongyao Company had only risen in recent years. Xueqi Company, on the other hand, was an industry that had been passed down for generations. In comparison, Xueqi Company's international status was perhaps a few levels higher than Rongyao Company's. Xueqi Company was considered a strong competitor to Rongyao Company. As for Mayor and my NI, they were siblings, and Mayor was the CEO of Xueqi Company, holding 20% of the company's shares. He could be considered one of the biggest shareholders of the company. Yunjian had planned to see why Mayor and my NI were here, but she did not expect my NI to target her. She narrowed her eyes and stared straight ahead. My NI had thought of teasing Yunjian when she saw her standing quietly on the side, especially since Xueqi Company and Rongyao Company's CEO, Temptress, were arch-enemies. Looking at Yunjian's attire, my NI had thought of mocking her, which was why she had mocked Yunjian so viciously. Just as she finished mocking Yunjian, my Ni's gaze was fixed on Temptress. To my NI, Yunjian was probably just an insignificant employee in the company, perhaps a poor beggar who came out of nowhere. My Ni's purpose of belittling Yunjian was to suppress Temptress in terms of aura. It was not that she had seen Yunjian. In my Ni's eyes, Yunjian was just a stepping stone for her to suppress Temptress. Before Yunjian could get angry, Temptress was already fuming when she heard what my NI said. How dare she call Sister Jian a poor beggar? If Sister Jian was poor, would there be any rich people in the world? You're not welcome here. Get lost. Scram as far as you can. Although the Demoness usually looked seductive, she was very strong when she was fierce. At this moment, the Demoness was walking toward Mayor and my NI in a pair of pointy stilettos. She picked up a mop and was about to chase them away. She looked like a shrew. "Io, my little Demoness, don't be like this. Nier is still young and doesn't know any better. If she said something she shouldn't have, don't lower yourself to her level." Mayor turned to the side and grabbed the mop that Siren swung at him. "Brother! How dare she enter Rongyao Company with that outfit?" "Humph, even if Rongyao Company is not as good as our Haji, Rongyao Company is still one of the top 10 multinational companies in the world. Even such a person can come in." The threshold of your Rongyao company is too low. My Ni placed her hand softly on her cheek. Even her brother, Mare, was ashamed to hear her scornful look. Temptress was even more furious when she heard that. She yanked the mop back from Mare's hand and was about to fling it at my Ni. It was then that Yun Jian's voice rang. What does it have to do with you whether the threshold of our Rongyao company is high or not? I think a beggar on the street is better than a certain woman who sprays Dior cologne all over. A woman who sprays Dior cologne all over? My Ni froze. Was she not referring to herself? Chapter 1008. Mare and my Ni didn't even notice the words Rongyao company. Yun Jian wasn't complaining about the Dior perfume. She was cursing my Ni in a roundabout way, saying that she was worse than a beggar on the street. In fact, most women knew how to spray perfume. For example, seductive women also sprayed perfume. There were many types of perfume. Some people liked simple and elegant scents. Seductive woman, for example, sprayed a simple and elegant perfume even though she was seductive. As for my Ni, she sprayed a very strong perfume. Of course, everyone had their own preferences. Yun Jian wasn't complaining about my ni's Dior perfume. It was just that my Ni had coincidentally sprayed Dior perfume. At the same time, everyone present could tell that Yun Jian was implying that my Ni was worse than a beggar on the street. This was purely a scolding without any vulgarities. Moreover, Yun Jian emphasized the woman who sprayed Dior perfume. There were only 4 people present. Yun Jian and Mare didn't spray perfume. Seductive woman sprayed a faint perfume. Yun Jian could tell that it wasn't a Dior perfume with one sniff. Then there was only one person present who fit the description. That person was my Ni. Therefore, my ni's face instantly darkened after Yun Jian said that. My Ni had been spoiled since she was young. She had always treated Yun Jian as a beggar. Now that she heard Yun Jian say that she was worse than a beggar, she exploded on the spot. What did you say? You actually said that I'm worse than a beggar. Ah! I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. My Ni flew into a rage on the spot. She picked up a teacup from the coffee table and threw it at Yun Jian. My Ni was a typical rich young lady. She was the young lady of one of the top 10 international corporations, Xueqi Company. Therefore, she had a very delicate personality. Usually, no one would even say anything bad about her. There were only a bunch of people who flattered her. Therefore, when my Ni heard Yun Jian belittle her to be worse than a beggar, she felt as if she had been greatly insulted. Especially when my Ni thought that Yun Jian was a lowly person. The feeling of being despised by a lowly person made my Ni explode instantly. Go to hell! My Ni grabbed a teacup and threw it at Yun Jian. Not even Mare was able to react to this sudden turn of events. However, when Mare turned to the side to stop his sister, my ni's teacup had already been thrown viciously at Yun Jian. Inside the teacup, there was also a bowl of cool tea water. Mare's expression suddenly changed, but it was too late for him to stop her. The teacup that was filled with cooling tea leaves had already spun in the air and was about to splash on Yun Jian when the cold tea leaves splashed onto her. Alluring Demon's gaze dimmed, but she did not do anything else because she knew Sister Jen's ability. In spite of it, Mare's heart clenched when he saw the scene. He could feel that Alluring Demon cared a lot about Yun Jian, and he did not come here to go against Alluring Demon. Instead, if the tea had splashed on Yun Jian and the teacup had smashed on her as well, she would not have been able to escape. Would it not be the end of him and Alluring Demon then? Just as he thought about it, Mare saw a horrifying scene. My Ni who stood beside Mare saw it as well. With a bang, Yun Jian suddenly took a step forward and spun the teacup in the air for a few seconds. Before the water in the teacup could pour completely, she suddenly raised her leg and kicked the teacup back at my Ni. Before the water in the teacup could pour, Yun Jian's kick was forceful, but it was just right. Both Mare and my Ni were dumbfounded. However, just as the two of them were stunned, my Ni suddenly felt a wave of ice-cold tea soak her body, and a large teacup was smashed towards her forehead. Chapter 1009. Initially, the teacup was headed straight for Yun Jian, but Yun Jian's high kick just now had landed on the teacup. She kicked it back at my Ni without spilling the tea. Not only was my Ni soaked and sticky from the cold tea in the teacup when she was hit by the teacup, but more importantly, her forehead swelled up from the impact. For a rich young lady like my Ni, she had never experienced such excruciating pain since she was young. Tears were about to flow from the impact, and at the same time, a deep hatred for Yun Jian welled up within her. The urge to kill Yun Jian on the spot took root in my Ni. Ah! Go to hell! My Ni held her forehead that was hit by the teacup and screamed at Yun Jian. Halfway through her sentence, my Ni endured the pain and told Mare in a tone that sounded like she wanted to tear Yun Jian into pieces. Gidge, how dare this damn woman hit me? Kill her. I want her dead. Ah! In spite of it, Yun Jian, who had retracted her leg, crossed her arms and looked at my Ni in disdain before snickering softly. Since when can a rabid dog like this enter my Rongyao company? Chase her out. Her words were directed at alluring witch, but her gaze was blatantly on my Ni. At this moment, my Ni was like an unreasonable little beggar. She looked pathetic and comical. Sister Jian, I'll chase these two rabid dogs out right away. Alluring witch grinned and walked to Mare with ease. Seeing Mare supporting my Ni in such a sorry state, the demonic woman sneered and provoked Mare. Don't worry. What are you waiting for? Take your sister and get out of my territory. Mare's heart skipped a beat when he saw Witch's impatient face, but he tried to explain his sister's behavior just now. Witch, don't be mad. My sister was just... Gidge. Who are you helping? It hurts so much. I'm going to die from the pain. My Ni screamed and wailed. Yun Jian frowned when she saw my Ni still screaming. She could not stand it anymore, so she went up and dragged my Ni out of the office by her collar. I'll help you if you don't leave. Yun Jian did not care that my Ni was still struggling as she dragged her all the way from the 25th floor to the first floor. Yun Jian's action frightened Mare and my Ni, but Mare was held back by Witch, so he could only watch his sister being dragged to the first floor by Yun Jian. Mare was afraid of hurting Witch, who was blocking his way, so he dared not do anything. There were plenty of employees working overtime on the first floor, especially the female employees who had gossiped about Yun Jian just now. When they saw Yun Jian dragging something out of the elevator while holding someone's collar, they were spooked. Although the female employees suspected that Yun Jian was the director of Rongyao Company, they did not have sufficient evidence. Moreover, how old was Yun Jian? Therefore, this suspicion was quickly ruled out by the crowd. When they saw Yun Jian dragging my Ni out of the elevator and tossing her out of the door, the employees were dumbfounded. How could this young lady be so fierce? And who was the person she was dragging? It was my Ni, the daughter of Xueqi Company's director. How dare she? Yun Jian turned slightly to look at the girl who looked to be around 16 or 17 years old who had suddenly appeared. The girl was Siren's subordinate and also a member of the Kosha mercenaries. Her code name was Fox. Fox was Tanuki, who delivered the Ferrari sports car to Longmen City for Yun Jian back then. Fox looked like a young girl, but she looked exactly the same as Tanuki. They both had the same baby face. She was actually 25 years old. As for the Fox, he was working under the demonic woman. Fox had just caught sight of Siren when she shouted, drawing Mare and my niece's attention to her. Then she saw Yun Jian. She was stunned but called out to Yun Jian right in front of Mare and my Ni. Chairman, you're back? The word chairman took Mare and my Ni by surprise. Fox was Siren's subordinate, and also someone who had come into contact with the mysterious chairman of Rongyao Company. Chapter 10-11. You're the director of the legendary Rongyao Company? My Ni widened her eyes at Yun Jian in disbelief when she heard Fox's words, her pupils constricting. My Ni looked like a downtrodden beggar as she stared at Yun Jian in disbelief and asked. My Ni did not even care about the excruciating pain from being hit by the teacup as she asked Yun Jian with a terrified gaze. Fox, who was standing on the stairs not far away, glanced down at my Ni in disdain before snorting and speaking to my Ni on behalf of Yun Jian. Sister Jian is the director of Rongyao Company, of course. Fox was different from Alluring Demon. Fox was an assassin from Kosha mercenaries and had only started working under Alluring Demon later on. Alluring Demon was the daughter of a bankrupt wealthy businessman whom Yun Jian had rescued back then. Alluring Demon was not an assassin or a secret agent, but she had mastered some basic self-defense skills. Yun Jian had saved Alluring Demon because she had taken a liking to Alluring Demon's business talent. Alluring Demon knew that Yun Jian was slaying God. It was Yun Jian who had rescued Alluring Demon when her family was in dire straits, so Alluring Demon was loyal to Yun Jian. Moreover, Alluring Demon was in charge of Rongyao Company now, so her status in the international arena was extraordinary. Alluring Demon's skills could take down a bunch of ordinary people, but she was nothing compared to high-level assassins and secret agents. After all, Alluring Demon was only good at business. She was once the daughter of a wealthy businessman and had been pampered since she was young. As for self-defense skills, she had learned them later on. This was also the reason why Yun Jian had sent Fox to assist Alluring Demon. Fox was from Kosha mercenaries, so his ability could take on at least 3 high-level secret agents. This allowed Fox to be ranked within the top 20 in the secret agent ranking. Since Fox came from Kosha mercenaries, he knew Yun Jian's Kosha mercenaries and Yun Jian's international status better than the witch. Therefore, Fox was not polite to my NI. Although my NI was the daughter of Hagi Company's chairman, if Hagi Company really wanted to fight with the Kosha mercenaries, the Kosha mercenaries could make Hagi Company disappear from this world forever. Fox's words shocked Mag and Mel even more. After that, my NI remembered the tone in which the fox had spoken to her. "Who the hell are you? You're just a dog following behind your master. How dare you speak to me in such a tone? Do you want to die?" Yun Jian was the chairman of Rongyao Company, so she shouldn't lose her dignity, so my NI was a little scared. She didn't dare to be mad at Yun Jian, so she turned to the fox. To my NI, since Yun Jian was the chairman, then she, Fox, was just a dog of Rongyao Company. How dare a subordinate be so arrogant to her? My NI stopped talking. Mel saw this and immediately scolded his sister. My NI pouted after being scolded by her brother. Just as she was about to continue speaking, she caught a glimpse of a fair and smooth hand reaching towards her. In the next second, a slap was heard. My NI only felt that her cheek was hit hard and she was sent flying to the ground. When my NI recovered from the pain, she just happened to see the owner of that jade hand standing in front of her. Chapter 10-12. Yun Jian walked closer to my NI as she spoke. Seeing his sister get slapped by Yun Jian, Mare was indifferent. That was because a demoness was blocking his way, preventing him from getting close. Yun Jian was already in front of my NI. She reached out and pinched my knee's chin. Suddenly, she tightened her grip and spoke to my NI in a hair-raising tone. "Or, you can replace Hagi Company and become history. How about that?" The words "become history" were like a heavy hammer that slammed into my knee's heart. My knee's heart tightened. "You!" My NI felt an unprecedented fear. Reality proved that she was quite frightened by Yun Jian. Especially when Yun Jian was pinching her chin and speaking to my NI with a slight hesitation. My NI felt that she had never been so scared in her life. However, just when my NI felt that her chin was about to be crushed by Yun Jian suddenly let go. "Take your sister and get out of here." Yun Jian kicked my NI. Then she turned her head. The young girl's beautiful face looked neither happy nor angry, but it made Mare's heart tremble. Mare had never seen a young girl like this. Yun Jian was the chairman of Rongyao Company. His Hagi Company's social status was higher than Yun Jian's Rongyao Company. If Yun Jian was an ordinary businesswoman, she would have probably rushed over to Hagi Company and asked for peace. But Yun Jian? What did she say? She said that she would make sure that Hagi Company would never see the light of tomorrow? Was this something that an underage girl would say? All right, Mare admitted that Yun Jian was not an ordinary person. If Yun Jian was an ordinary person, then were there any geniuses in this world? Just as Mare thought of this, he was already holding his sister's hand. My NI had been spoiled since she was a child. Yun Jian's slap just now had completely stunned my NI. Mare had just helped his sister my NI to her feet, and was planning to leave this place first before coming back to find the demoness. Yun Jian's leisurely voice came from the back of his head again. "Tell Matt that if he doesn't want to disappear in the long river of history, he'd better behave himself. If he dares to lay his hands on my Rongyao Company again, he'd better wash his neck and wait for death." Matt was Mare and my niece's father, and Matt was also the chairman of the Hagi Company. Mare had indeed used his status as the president to suppress Rongyao Company because of the siren, but it was just a superficial suppression. Yun Jian might be in Longmen City, but in reality, the slightest movement among the international bigwigs could not escape her eyes. Yun Jian was also well aware that the person who was stirring up trouble in Rongyao Company was not Mayor, but his father, Matt. Matt's motive was obvious as well. He wanted to take over Rongyao Company for himself. Mayor paused but left in a hurry with his sister Mai Ni. Today was definitely the most pathetic day of Mayor and Mai Ni's lives. Watching Mayor and Mai Ni leave in a hurry, the few employees who were still working overtime in Rongyao Company were dumbfounded. Especially Yun Jian's arrogant words just now. Rongyao Company might be inferior to Hoggy Company in terms of capital, but Yun Jian had asked Mayor to pass the message to Hoggy Company's chairman, Matt, with such arrogant words. If he dared to do anything else, he'd better wash his neck and wait for death. Chapter 10-13. It was not Mai Ni's first time wreaking havoc in Rongyao Company. The last few times Mayor and Mai Ni came, Mayor simply wanted to see a luring demon. Mai Ni, on the other hand, was here to pick a fight. Therefore, when no one picked a fight with her, Mai Ni came to the employees and humiliated them. Even so, the employees dared not make a sound. She was the daughter of Hoggy Company's chairman after all. Who would dare to go against her? Unless they were not afraid of losing their jobs. Therefore, the few staff members present were usually very unwilling to see Mai Ni. At the same time, they were extremely disgusted with her. They just did not say it out loud. In spite of it, they nearly ran over to clap and cheer when they saw how Yun Jian thrashed Mai Ni just now. In spite of it, Yun Jian's domineering image was deeply imprinted in their minds. If anyone mentioned Rongyao Company's chairman next time, they would introduce him to them proudly, telling them how cool and amazing their chairman was. While the employees were still admiring Yun Jian was already walking on the main road of Maryland with a luring demon and fox. Haha, we finally got rid of that annoying mayor and gave that little B***tch Mai Ni a good thrashing. Sister Jian, to thank you for your great feat just now, I'll treat both of you to supper. A luring demon patted Fox's shoulder and guffawed at Yun Jian. Let's go. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Then, the three of them went to the busiest nightclub in Maryland in Country M. A luring demon ordered generously. When the dishes were served, a luring demon and fox reported Rongyao Company's recent situation to Yun Jian. Yun Jian's eyes narrowed as she listened. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when they were done with supper. Gu Xian, Dan Tianxing, and the others had finished watching the race and rushed over after receiving Yun Jian's call. During the 3-day Labor Day holiday, Gu Xian brought Yun Jian to Country M to watch the race. After spending a night in a hotel in Maryland, Yun Jian bought a plane ticket back to China the next day. Before she left, she also sent an invitation to Siren and Vixen, inviting them to attend the wedding of her mother, Qin Yiru, and Gu Junjian on May 21st. At the same time, Yun Jian also sent out a lot of invitations, using the name of Kosha mercenaries to invite many international bigshots to Qin Yiru's wedding. Of course, for now, everything was being done in secret. Yun Jian returned to Longmen City alone. Gu Xian had already returned to school, so he sent Yun Jian to the airport and watched Yun Jian board the plane before leaving. Yun Jian got off the plane at a place called Yang City near Longmen City. It was already noon when she got off the plane and took a car back to Longmen City. Just as she reached home, Yun Jian saw a tall silhouette standing at the door. It had been a few days since she last saw Ce. When Yun Jian saw Ce, she ran over with a smile. Like a teenage girl, her heart skipped a beat as she threw herself into Ce's arms. Qin Yiru was not at home. She must have gone to chat with Mrs. Yang. Just as Ce pulled the girl into his arms and was about to speak with his magnetic voice, he was interrupted by one of the 3 heads that popped down the stairs. Wow, Ce, Gidge is snatching a girl in broad daylight. Shame on you. Chapter 10-14. Xiao Yunzhu shook his head as he spoke, as if he was reciting an ancient poem. Xiao Yunzhu had already started his 1st grade, so he had a budding understanding of some things. Of course, Xiao Yunzhu did not know where to use the phrase, snatching a girl. It was only because he had learned these words in the past few days that Xiao Yunzhu was able to use them. Children were often the most innocent when they were not in school, but once they stayed in school for a long time, they would naturally understand some things. However, not long after Xiao Yunzhu spoke, the mischievous Duanli interrupted. No, no, that's not the right word. Duanli even cleared her throat as she spoke. She had completely turned into a little teacher, and then said very seriously, it should be like this. Ahem. In broad daylight, under the clear sky, Big Brother Ce hugged Big Sister Yunjian, who had just returned home and did something shameful. Xiao Yunju's words might not have caused such a big misunderstanding, but Duanli's words made people's imaginations run wild. Originally, when Yunjian had jumped into his arms, Ce had, of course, hugged her symbolically. How could he not hug the woman he loved when she jumped into his arms? But sure, Duanli's words. Did she mean that he was hugging Yunjian and doing something shameful? Xiao Yunju and Duanli were completely misled by the new words that the schoolteacher had taught them. Yunjian and Ce stood at the door, but they could clearly hear the conversation between two of the three little heads that poked their heads downstairs. Yunjian's cheeks immediately turned red. Ce's face also darkened. Being caught by Xiao Yunju and the other two, Yunjian had a feeling that she would be teaching the children wrong things. Thus, just as she was about to squirm out of Ce's arms, she was pressed back down by Ce. You three come down. Ce didn't turn around. He maintained his position of hugging Yunjian as he spoke to the three little heads poking out from upstairs. Towards Xiao Yunju and the other two, Ce had never spoken in an angry tone. Therefore, Xiao Yunju and the other two subconsciously believed that their big brother Ce had the best temper. He seemed to be having fun again. Children were very naughty. Xiao Yunju was also a boy. Of course, he was also naughty. Duanli also had a lively personality, so when she heard Ce's slightly gloomy voice, Xiao Yunju and the other two started to hide, as if they were about to be caught by Ce. They kept shouting with all their might. Wow! Big Brother Ce is going to snatch the kids. Big Brother Ce is going to catch us. We're rocks that don't move. Big Brother Ce can't see us. Xiao Yunju was having so much fun that he was sweating profusely. However, Yunjian, who was standing downstairs, felt a little awkward. However, nestling in Ce's arms made her feel at ease. It was as if she had really returned home and didn't have to worry about anything else. Yunjian's lips curled into a smile as she hugged Ce with her arms wrapped around him, pressing her body tightly against him. Your mom went out. Adam and the others also went out. There's only the two of us at home and the three upstairs. When he mentioned the three upstairs, Ce recalled the scene just now and his face darkened. Okay. Yunjian nodded. Then, she wanted to withdraw from Ce's arms. She said, it's already noon. You guys haven't eaten yet, right? Let's take Xiao Yunju and the other two out for lunch. Yunjian wanted to squirm out of Ce's arms, but Ce pressed her back into his arms. Adam's injuries have already recovered, Ce said again. Yunjian felt a little strange. Why was he so talkative today? In spite of it, Yunjian did not see the smirk on Ce's lips. The girl's front was pressed against him. A certain twin peaks were pressed tightly against his chest. He could even feel the girl's fullness through his thin clothes. Chapter 10-15. Yunjian's face was pressed against Ce's chest and her head was just touching Ce's chin. If she didn't look up, she wouldn't be able to see Ce's slightly curved lips. Although she was a little suspicious, she just pursed her lips and listened to Ce's nonsense in the end. Yunjian was still puzzled. Why was Ce, who had never said a word of nonsense before, talking non-stop like a chatterbox today? Coincidentally, Yunjian responded to Ce again. Then she glanced at a clock not far away. She saw that the hour and minute hands were pointing at noon. She interrupted Ce, who was still talking nonsense. Let's take Xiao Zhu and the rest for lunch. I'm a little hungry too. As she spoke, Yunjian gently stroked her flat tummy. Ce felt his heart overflow when he heard the girl's soft voice. He didn't even know when he agreed to Yunjian's request. Okay. As soon as he finished speaking, he let go of Yunjian's alluring body. Then, he held Yunjian's hand and walked upstairs. Xiao Yunju and the other two really thought that Ce was going to play hide-and-seek with them. Their laughter spread to every corner of the villa. However, when it came to Ce, he caught Xiao Yunju and the other two almost instantly and brought them downstairs as if they were chickens. Seeing that Xiao Yunju, Duanli, and Duanya were sweating profusely from playing, Yun Jian even used a towel to wipe their sweat. Then, Yun Jian held Duan Li and Duan Ya's hands. Ce extended his slender hand and let Xiao Yunzhu drag him away. Only then did the five of them leisurely walk towards the restaurant. Xiao Yunzhu, Duan Li, and Duan Ya each ordered their favorite dishes. Then, Yun Jian ordered 4 more dishes. 7 dishes, 4 meat and 3 vegetables. Xiao Yunzhu, Duan Li, and Duan Ya ate until their faces were covered in gravy. Eat slowly, Yun Jian said softly as she scraped the rice stuck to Xiao Yunzhu's mouth. Xiao Yunzhu and the other 2 weren't wolfing down the food because they were hungry. They were competing to see who could eat faster and who could grab more food. Therefore, they didn't even have time to talk. A child's pleasure was nothing more than these few points. Snatching food from their friends was the most delicious food. However, if it was really a world-class delicacy, no matter how delicious the food was, they would lose their appetite if they didn't have children to fight with. Because she knew from Ce that Qin Yiru and Mrs. Yang went shopping, Qin Yiru also knew that Ce was a responsible child. Therefore, she was relieved to leave Xiao Yunzhu and the other 2 in Ce's care. Qin Yiru would probably come back at night. With this in mind, Yun Jian thought of taking Xiao Yunzhu and the other 2 out to play in the afternoon. Xiao Zhu, is there anywhere you want to go? Big sister and big brother Ce will take the 3 of you out to play in the afternoon, Yun Jian said with a smile as she rubbed Xiao Yunzhu and the other 2's heads. At this moment, Yun Jian's smile was the most sincere. At this moment, the smile on her face was from the bottom of her heart. The amusement park. We're going to the amusement park that we went to last time, Xiao Yunzhu immediately said to Yun Jian. At the same time, he had a look of anticipation on his face. Chapter 10:16. Receiving Xiao Yunzhu and the rest's expectant gazes, Yun Jian pressed her lips together before she smiled and nodded. Okay. Yun Jian patted Xiao Yunzhu's head lightly and urged, hurry up and eat if you want to go to the amusement park. You won't get to play if you're late. Amusement parks usually closed at 8 or 9 in the evening. Longmen City's amusement park was especially new, so it had been operating later these few days. It would only start to chase customers away at about 10 in the evening. Yay! Yeah! Yeah! Xiao Yunzhu yelled yay, thrice in excitement and swiftly dug into the rice in his bowl, stuffing it all into his stomach. Soon, Yun Jian and Ce took Duan Li, Duan Ya, and Xiao Yunzhu's hands respectively and took the bus to Longmen City's new amusement park. In 1999, there were not as many amusement parks as there were now. Longmen City's amusement park was one of the earlier ones, so people from neighboring cities would come here for sightseeing. Hence, there were more tourists here. Yun Jian and Ce had already brought Xiao Yunzhu and the rest here before, so they went in quickly after buying tickets. It was May Day, a long holiday for the students. Parents usually brought their children out for sightseeing. Moreover, children preferred places like amusement parks where children could play, so today, the amusement park was full of tourists. Jia, we're going to play bumper cars. Xiao Yunzhu and the rest hugged each other excitedly as soon as they entered the amusement park. They even led the way to the bumper cars venue. The newly opened amusement park in Longmen City was more upscale, so they could play all the games inside as long as they bought a ticket at the entrance. However, they had to line up to enter the park in order to play the games. Xiao Yunzhu and the rest stood in line at the venue, holding Yun Jian and Ce's hands respectively. There were a lot of people lining up here, just like a long dragon. Some people were even getting impatient from waiting. Duan Li stood on the spot, her little hand held by Yun Jian as she looked around. At this time, a group of young boys and girls about the same age as Yun Jian jumped over the railing. Because there were a lot of people in the queue, sometimes there would be people who cut the queue when the staff wasn't paying attention. Not only did she cut the queue, but when the young boys and girls jumped over the railing, one of the girls stepped on Duan Li's little foot fiercely. Duan Li was still young and her feet were still tender. She was stepped on by one of the girls who jumped over the railing and cut in line. She immediately screamed, "Ah! It hurts!" Yun Jian looked over and saw the girl who had climbed over the fence stepping on Duan Li's foot. The girl even rolled her eyes at Duan Li and muttered softly, "F***ck, annoying brat, get away from me." She then tried to catch up with the boys and girls who jumped over the railing and cut in line. Duan Li's frail body contorted from the girl's stomp. She curled up on the ground, tears falling from her eyes from the pain. Chestnut, what's wrong with you? Xiao Yunju reacted the fastest, squeezing to Duanli to check where she was hurt. Seeing that the girl was about to leave, Yunjian lowered her gaze. She suddenly grabbed the girl's wrist when she was about to move forward with the surrounding passengers. Chapter 10:17. Yunjian saw Xiao Yunju slowly helping Duanli up from the ground, so she did not help Duanli right away. Instead, she caught the girl who stepped on Duanli and tried to escape. Jie, it doesn't hurt. Duanli had been beaten since she was young, so when she saw Yunjian tugging at the girl's shirt for her, she tugged at Yunjian's clothes in fear. Duanli was afraid that Yunjian would get into a conflict with someone else because of her. When Duanli was beaten up by her alcoholic father, there was once a neighbor auntie who came out to stop her. In the end, her father beat the kind neighbor auntie as well. Duanli was still young, but her experience was something that many people could not go through in their lifetime. Duanli was afraid that she would bring unnecessary trouble to Yunjian because of her. She was afraid that Yunjian would be harmed because of her. Due to her childhood, Duanli might look lively and playful on the outside, but deep down, she was afraid of the world. No one could understand the loneliness and fear that lurked in her heart. Yunjian lowered her head slightly. She could see that Duanli's face was pale from being stepped on by the girl just now. A child's feet were soft and tender, unable to withstand even the slightest injury. What was more, when the girl flipped over the railing just now, she had jumped down from the railing that was about half a meter high. Stepping on Duanli's foot from a height was like standing up and stomping on Duanli's foot. Not to mention that Duanli was just a child. Even an adult would turn pale after being stomped on like that. When Duanli tugged at her clothes and said, "It doesn't hurt," Yunjian felt something tugging at her heart. F***CKU, are you crazy? I didn't do anything to you. What right do you have to make me apologize for no reason? The girl with curly hair looked like a gangster. It was nothing to be a gangster. Yunjian was definitely the gangster among the students in Longmen City. She was now the boss of Zhe Province's top mafia group. As a person, being in the underworld wasn't scary, but the scariest thing was that he didn't admit what he had done. Refusing to admit what he had done was probably something that many people had done before, so it wasn't unusual. But what was disgusting was that not only did this girl not admit it, her aggressive tone made her sound more reasonable. Let go, let go, let go. If you don't let go, I'll call someone over to beat you up. Some people relied on the fact that they were gangsters and knew some ruffians in the society. Then, they felt that they knew some invincible people, and their tone was very arrogant. This girl was such a person. She glanced at Yunjian contemptuously from the corner of her eyes and struggled desperately to shake off Yunjian's hand that was grabbing her wrist. The surrounding people had all seen the scene just now. Everyone present felt that Yunjian was right. Little girl, we won't say anything about you cutting the queue just now, but it's a little unreasonable for you to not apologize after stepping on someone's sister, isn't it? There was a tall and plump young man with a beer belly who stood at the front of the line. He saw what happened just now and spoke to the girl on Yunjian's behalf. Before the young man could finish, however, the girl cut him off. F***CK off, fatty. It's none of your business. As she spoke, she turned back to look at Yunjian. Are you letting go or not? If you don't let go, I'll ask my friends to catch you and beat you up. Do you believe me? Chapter 10:18. The girl was stunned. Just as she was about to speak, she was attracted by the voices of a few young men and women who were squeezing their way to the front. Young Kai-dai, what are you doing? Why aren't you coming over? One of the boys, who was taller than the rest, bellowed when he saw the girl who was held back by Yunjian. Obviously, this girl's name was Yang Kai-dai. Yang Kai-dai became even more frustrated after being yelled at by the boy. Her friends had already cut the queue and ran to the front, but she was being held back by Yunjian and could not catch up with her friends. Moreover, one bumper car could seat 2 people. Yang Kai-dai sat in the same car with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was a real hooligan. She was so anxious to catch up with him because she wanted to sit in the same bumper car as him. In the end, Yunjian wanted her to apologize? Yang Kai-dai thought that she was a person with a lot of self-respect, especially after she met her current boyfriend and made friends with many gangsters. She felt that she was very arrogant. Yang Kai-dai felt that it was impossible for her to apologize to Yun Jian. Come over quickly. There's AB*TCH here who wants me to apologize. Damn it. I haven't done anything to her yet. Yang Kai-dai was getting more and more frustrated as she was surrounded by people in the queue. She shouted at her friends who had already run to the front. Upon hearing Yang Katie's shout, her friends who had already cut the queue all ran back. Yun Jian was standing in front with Duan Li and Duan Ye, while Ce was standing behind her. Although Ce was tall, he deliberately bent his body and leaned slightly against Yun Jian. That was why Yang Kai-dai did not see Ce. At this moment, Yang Katie's friends had already run back and jumped over the railing one by one. They surrounded Yun Jian and the people in the queue as if they were going to fight. F***CK. Little girl, you look pretty. Are you trying to bully my girlfriend? Standing outside the railing, a hooligan-like boy raised his head and pointed his chin at Yun Jian as he spoke arrogantly. This boy was obviously Yang Katie's hooligan boyfriend. However, as soon as the boy appeared, he stared at Yun Jian without blinking. That expression was very unusual. Seeing this, Ce stood behind Yun Jian and hugged her slender waist from behind. You're not going to apologize, are you? Yun Jian's tone was cold. She narrowed her eyes, but the atmosphere around her had changed. Looking at Yun Jian's cold expression, Yang Katie's boyfriend felt an itch in his heart. Yun Jian's current appearance was like a cold little beauty. At this moment, Yu Hui felt a certain part of his body swell up. He even felt that his girlfriend, Yang Kai-dai, was tasteless. Hey little beauty, you seem to have quite a temper. Yu Hui said as he looked at Yun Jian with a sneaky smile. However, just as he finished speaking, Yun Jian reached out and pulled Yang Katie's body. Her other hand slapped Yang Katie's cheek fiercely. Slap! Yun Jian slapped Yang Kai-dai so hard that she leaned against the railing. Before Yang Kai-dai could explode, Yun Jian stretched out her leg and stepped on Yang Katie's foot. In the next second, Yang Kai-dai screamed like a pig being slaughtered. For a moment, she did not even have time to scold Yun Jian. Yun Jian stepped on Yang Katie's foot with one foot. She stomped on Yang Katie's foot fiercely as she tossed and turned. Chapter 10:19. She paused for a while. Looks like you're enjoying it. Yun Jian added. She increased her strength, and at the same time, her whole body was almost on top of Yang Katie's feet. Yang Kai-dai was an adult, so of course, she wouldn't be willing to be stepped on by Yun Jian like this. She struggled with all her might, but Yun Jian slapped her every time she struggled. This scene shocked everyone in the queue, and at the same time, Yu Hui and the rest were scared silly. No one expected Yun Jian to be so ferocious. Most importantly, Yun Jian looked thin and frail, but her current look was enough to make her look like a real woman. Not to mention whether Yang Kai-dai could beat Yun Jian. Yang Kai-dai couldn't even reach out to touch the corner of Yun Jian's clothes. Yun Jian stepped on Yang Katie's feet, and the weight of her whole body was exerted on Yang Katie's feet. Yang Katie's face instantly turned red, and she was in a state where she couldn't bear the pain anymore. Ah! Yu Hui, hurry up and drag this damn woman out. Save me. Yang Kai-dai couldn't beat Yun Jian, so she waved her arms wildly, trying to grab Yun Jian's hair and tear it apart by force. However, Yun Jian didn't let her do as she wished. Whenever Yang Kai-dai wanted to reach out, Yun Jian would directly give her a fiery slap in this narrow space, causing Yang Katie's whole body to twitch. Yu Hui and his brothers were dumbfounded by what they saw. Don't girls usually like to pull hair when they fight? Why did it feel different when it came to Yun Jian? When Yun Jian hit Yang Kai-dai, Ce protected Xiao Yunju, Duan Li, and Duan Ye behind her, and at the same time, didn't let Xiao Yunju and the rest see the scene. F***CK, little beauty. What are you doing? Hurry up and let go of my girlfriend's hand. Don't force me to hit you. Yu Hui saw that his girlfriend was being bullied by Yun Jian, and he wanted to do something, but he considered that Yun Jian was a girl. Most importantly, Yun Jian was much prettier than his girlfriend. Yu Hui felt that he really liked Yun Jian, and he felt that he wanted to dump his girlfriend and get to know Yun Jian. However, if he didn't save his girlfriend, Yu Hui felt that he would leave a bad impression with Yun Jian. If he didn't even save his girlfriend, Yu Hui subconsciously thought that he would leave a bad impression in the hearts of girls. Wanting to act like a man in front of Yun Jian, Yu Hui went to Yun Jian and extended his hand to stop Yun Jian from stepping on his girlfriend's foot. Of course, Yu Hui wanted to touch Yun Jian's soft and tender body when he pulled Yun Jian away. Yun Jian naturally felt Yu Hui's thoughts, and Ce, who was standing behind Yun Jian, was naturally very sensitive to Yu Hui's actions as he was also a man. Just as Yu Hui was about to approach Yun Jian, Ce, who was standing behind Yun Jian, helped Xiao Yunju and the other two settle down. He didn't even bother holding onto the railing. He lifted his long leg and stepped on the railing with one foot, jumping over the railing from the long queue. That wasn't all. Ce lifted his leg quickly, and after he jumped over the railing, he put both his hands into his trouser pockets, and without even using his hands, he kicked Yu Hui, who was about to reach out to Yun Jian. Yu Hui was sent flying by Ce's swift and fierce kick. With a loud bang, he fell to the ground, and Yu Hui felt that his internal organs were about to be shattered. Chapter 10:20. Yu Hui clutched his internal organs. He felt as if his internal organs were about to be crushed by Ce's kick. This feeling was worse than death. Cough, cough, cough. Yu Hui clutched his chest and coughed violently. Jumping over the railing meant that they weren't in the queue. Amusement parks would usually set up a long queue railing. Outside the railing, there was a flat area where there was no need to queue. Yu Hui and his group had jumped over the railing to run back to help Yang Kai-dai just now. Ce had also jumped over the railing and kicked away Yu Hui, who wanted to touch Yun Jian. Yun Jian's eyes dimmed slightly before her lips curled up. At this moment, she felt warmth in her heart. Because he was behind her. Slap. Thinking of Duan Li's feet that hadn't recovered yet, Yun Jian gave Yang Kai-dai another slap. Duan Li was only a child to begin with. She was still young and was still growing. Places like the back of her feet were tender and tender to begin with. Even Yun Jian's feet were soft and tender, let alone Duan Li. So when she thought of what Yang Kai-dai did to Duan Li and refused to apologize, she gave Yang Kai-dai a few more slaps without hesitation. In the end, Yun Jian grabbed Yang Kaidi's hair and pulled Yang Kaidi's head in front of her. She didn't let go of Yang Kaidi's foot. "Are you going to apologize or not?" Yun Jian said and gave Yang Kai-dai another slap. In fact, Yun Jian was already very soft-hearted. According to her character in her previous life, Yang Kai-dai would have already been killed. But now that they were in the amusement park, she didn't want to cause a big commotion. However, to an ordinary person, Yun Jian's action was quite shocking. If it was any other ordinary person, even if they saw their own people being stepped on by someone else and were rejected when they asked for an apology, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Even if the other party was as confident as Yang Kai-dai, they could only give up. What else could they do? He could only admit that he was unlucky. After all, Yun Jian had beaten, scolded, and even asked for an apology. If it were an ordinary person, who would dare to do that? Not only was this an action that could easily cause trouble, but more importantly, to hit a person in front of so many people, even an ordinary person would feel embarrassed. Especially for girls, they had to pay attention to their image. Who would be like Yun Jian? Who would be so unscrupulous? Not to mention whether ordinary people could have the same strength as Yun Jian. "I apologize. I apologize. Please let me go. Ouch, ouch, ouch. It hurts." Yang Kaidi's hands were held by Yun Jian as she pulled her hair over mercilessly. She was in so much pain that she broke out in cold sweat. How arrogant she was just now was how weak she was now. Yang Kaidi's entire body was trembling violently. At this moment, even the tourists standing around felt a trace of fear. How could such a young girl do things in such a cruel way? I didn't hear it. Just when everyone present thought that Yun Jian would let go after hearing the apology, they heard Yun Jian's cold voice again. The next moment, following Yun Jian's cold voice was a crisp slap. Yun Jian gave Yang Kai-dai another slap. At the same time she raised her voice, and her tone was even more arrogant that couldn't be ignored. "If you don't apologize to me, I will break your leg." Only then did Yang Kai-dai know fear, and her whole body was trembling. At this moment, Yang Kaidi's heart was roaring. "She is the devil! She is the devil!" Chapter 10:21. She had clearly apologized. She had already apologized. But what did Yun Jian say? She said she didn't hear it? Could it be that because she said it too lightly, Yunjian didn't mean it? Yang Kai-dai couldn't help but curse in her heart. How could there be such an unreasonable person in this world? Wasn't Yunjian lying to her? But Yang Kai-dai forgot. While she was thinking about it, she seemed to have forgotten something. How did she treat Yunjian just now? How unreasonable was she when she didn't admit what she did to Duan Li? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please let me go. Let me go. Yang Kai-dai begged desperately. For a girl like Yang Kai-dai, she was arrogant because she had a boyfriend. Yu Hui was a gangster and knew quite a lot of gangsters. He often fought with others and even liked to call a group of friends who called themselves brothers. Whenever one of their buddies got into a little bit of trouble with someone else, this group of buddies would all come. Even if it was just a little bit of trouble, they would make it sound like a big deal. Then, a large group of people would band together to fight. Yu Hui often did this kind of thing. Of course, this wasn't considered a gang fight. If one really had to talk about it, wasn't a guy like Yu Hui just trying to find some sense of presence in front of girls? Gang fights, after gang fights, what was it for? To run in front of girls to show off. But what about girls? Some girls had never been exposed to such things. Then, when they heard a guy like Yu Hui exaggerating and saying that he was as powerful as Superman, they really thought that guys were omnipotent. However, girls like Yang Kai-dai naturally fell in love with Yu Hui. She was even tricked by Yu Hui into thinking that Yu Hui and this group of people were omnipotent. But in the end, if she really met someone like Yunjian, without the help of her boyfriend, Yu Hui, Yang Kai-dai would probably beg Yunjian to let her go. This time, Yang Kai-dai really screamed and begged Yunjian to let her go. She was afraid that Yunjian would say, "I didn't hear you" again. When Yang Kai-dai realized that her boyfriend wasn't as powerful as he said, Yang Kai-dai could only beg Yunjian to let her go. Yunjian only smiled coldly. Then, she swung her hand and let go of Yang Kai-dai's hand. She didn't plan to continue to hit Yang Kai-dai. After Yunjian let go of her hands and legs, Yang Kai-dai felt like she was reborn. She was so scared that she crawled along the railing like she was avoiding the plague. Yu Hui's legs kicks leg. As for the rest of them, they didn't dare to come up to Yunjian and see. In the end, Yang Kai-dai's group didn't even bother with the bumper cars anymore. They all ran away like a puff of smoke. Yay! Sister and Ce Gij beat the bad guys. Xiao Yunju's cute little hands held onto Duan Li as he shouted. The surrounding crowd was shocked by Yunjian and Ce's skills. After that, Yunjian and Ce brought Xiao Yunju and the other two to line up as usual. Yunjian also carefully checked Duan Li's leg. Seeing that there was a black patch, Yunjian carried Duan Li. Although Duan Li's leg hurt, she didn't want to go home. Chapter 10:22. Duan Li was carried by Yunjian. Duan Li was very light, as if she had no flesh on her body. Therefore, Yunjian didn't feel tired at all. Duan Li had 2 ponytails today and looked very cute. When Yunjian carried her, the ponytails would gently touch Yunjian's skin. However, Yunjian didn't have any expression of disgust. Instead, she pursed her lips and smiled gently. Ce flipped over the railing and stood behind her. "Young lady, your boyfriend was so handsome just now." When Yang Kai-dai stepped on Duan Li's foot and wanted to leave without apologizing, the surrounding people were all watching the show. Only this young man with a beer belly spoke up for Yunjian. Now that he saw Yunjian and Ce, this young man couldn't help but say to Yunjian. This young man with a beer belly was a typical fat man, and his body looked rather burly. He didn't have any other intentions, he just wanted to say something to Yunjian. Yunjian also admired people like him who were willing to help others when they met on the road. When the young man with a beer belly finished speaking, Yunjian nodded and smiled at him, but didn't say anything. Yunjian's smile was a tacit agreement to the young man with a beer belly. Ce was her boyfriend. The young man with a beer belly seemed to have no one to talk to, so he looked at Duan Li, who was in Yunjian's arms, Duan Ye, and Xiao Yunju, who was being held by Ce. The young man with a beer belly couldn't help but ridicule them. "You guys look so young, especially you, young lady. I think you look like a 16 or 17-year-old girl. Haha, if I didn't see these 3 kids, I would have thought that you two were a couple from school." The beer-bellied young man obviously didn't believe that Xiao Yunju and the other two were Yunjian and Ce. Some people didn't look old. Although Yunjian and Ce looked young, the beer-bellied youth felt that they were old. Usually, when a young couple went on a date or went on a trip, it was impossible for them to bring their younger siblings along, right? If she were to bring her younger siblings along, their parents would have to come along as well, right? Although he couldn't believe it, the beer-bellied young man would rather think in another direction than think in this direction. Yunjian was stunned when she heard the beer-bellied young man's voice. She was about to say something when the young man interrupted her. However, Ce snatched the right to speak. It's not good to keep the child cooped up at home. You should take some time to bring the child out for a walk. This meant that he had tacitly agreed with the beer-bellied youth's words. The corners of Yunjian's mouth twitched. She wanted to explain again, but Ce hugged her slender waist and looked at her lovingly. He said, "Stop fooling around. Hold the child tight." Yunjian was speechless. She could even feel the naked gazes of the people around her. Ha ha ha. I can tell that you two have a good relationship. The beer-bellied youth believed Ce's words without a doubt. At the same time, he changed from calling Yunjian and Ce a couple to calling them husband and wife. Xiao Yunju and Duanli looked younger. Whether it was Xiao Yunju, Duanli, or Duanya, they were thin and weak. They looked like kindergartners. In comparison, Xiao Yunju had grown taller and looked much better. However, he looked like he was 6 or 7 years old at most. If Yunjian and Ce looked older, then it wasn't too unbelievable that they had given birth to Xiao Yunju and the other two at an early age. The beer-bellied man smiled. Very good. Ce only revealed a charming smile. It was easy for Ce to say something that went against his conscience. Chapter 10:23. In the end, Ce actually started chatting with the beer-bellied young man. However, from the beginning to the end, Ce was flaunting his relationship with Yunjian. In Ce's own words, he couldn't wait for the whole world to know that Yunjian already belonged to him and only him. He absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to have any designs on Yunjian. The long line actually passed by very quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was Yunjian's turn. Because he still had Duanya with him, Ce didn't plan to play bumper cars like the other kids. A bumper car could only seat 2 people, so Yunjian and Duanya sat in the same car. Xiao Yunju and Duanli were already starting to understand things, so Yunjian didn't have to worry about them sitting in the same car. Ce stood by the side and watched as Yunjian, Xiao Yunju, and Duanli sat in the same car. They were having a lot of fun. Seeing Yunjian pursing her lips and feeling happy from the bottom of her heart, Ce also felt happy. He stared at Yunjian the whole time. Even the middle-aged aunties in the line could feel the love in his eyes. Xiao Yunju and the other two loved to play bumper cars. Some of the dangerous games in the amusement park weren't suitable for Xiao Yunju and the other two, so Xiao Yunju and the other two dragged Yunjian along and immersed themselves in the bumper cars game for the whole afternoon. After playing once, they dragged Yunjian and Ce to line up for the second time. As a result, they didn't feel tired at all. When it was time for dinner, Yunjian and Ce brought Xiao Yunju and the other two to a restaurant in the amusement park to order dinner. The dishes in the amusement park were generally more expensive than those outside, but even so, Yunjian ordered a lot of dishes. During dinner, Yunjian sent a text message to Qin Yiru, telling her that she, Ce, and Xiao Yunju would not be home for dinner tonight. Labor Day was a 3-day holiday. Today was supposed to be the last day of Labor Day, so there should be evening self-study at night. However, the weather forecast said that the weather would not be good on the last day of Labor Day, and it happened to be a holiday, so the evening self-study was cancelled. Of course, no one expected the weather to be so sunny today. In this era, it was common for the weather forecast to be wrong. Jejia, let's go boating after eating, okay? Yunju asked Duanli and Duanya as he gobbled up the rice in his bowl. Okay. Yunjian rubbed Xiao Yunju's head. She felt that her brother was getting cuter and cuter. After dinner, the sky had already darkened. Night quickly shrouded the sky and the amusement park was soon illuminated by neon lights. There were still many people playing in the amusement park. Of course, the boats by the creek were still sailing. It was just that the boats here were charged. Yunjian knew that as well. Ce had just paid for an hour's ride on the pedals. Yunjian was just about to step onto the boat with Xiao Yunju and the other two. However, at this moment, she unconsciously saw a familiar face not far away. The familiar person was graceful and elegant. She was holding a boy who was about the same age as Xiao Yunju. They were surrounded by a group of people as they walked over. When she saw the graceful and elegant woman, Yunjian's eyes immediately locked. How did she meet Guxian's biological mother, Hua Yun, here? Just as she was thinking this, Hua Yun also saw Yunjian. Chapter 10:24. The moment Hua Yun saw Yunjian, she was stunned. At this moment, Hua Yun was surrounded by more than 10 bodyguards. She looked like a typical rich person. Hua Yun was holding the hand of a boy who was about the same age as Xiao Yunju. It was not hard to tell that the boy was the child of Hua Yun and her current husband, Hu Chaochuan. Hua Yun's current husband was ugly. Therefore, even though Hua Yun was good-looking, the boy she was holding the hand of took after her current husband, Hu Chaochuan. He had a flat nose, a round face, and even his hair was a little bald. It had to be said that the boy was extremely ugly. However, he was dressed in branded clothes. It was obvious that he was a rich man's son. When Hua Yun saw Yunjian and Ce with Xiao Yunju and the other two, she was stunned. Hua Yun remembered how Yunjian had insulted her the last time. Last time, Yunjian had called her a cheap woman. She had said that she and her current husband, Hu Chaochuan, were dogs and meows. Hua Yun had been waiting for the last time. When Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian got married, she wanted to go to the wedding and show off how sweet and beautiful her life was now. Especially now that her identity was different from before. Her husband's uncle was an international business tycoon. Even in the entire world, his status was extraordinary. There was no need to mention it. This was because Hua Yun believed that a person like Yunjian would never be able to reach that level. Of course, her husband, Hu Chaochuan, was an example. Hu Chaochuan had followed his uncle and had become an international tycoon. For example, her husband was one of the investors of the amusement park today. That was why Hua Yun was here. It could be said that Hua Yun's son was on vacation these few days. Therefore, Hua Yun had been wandering around the amusement park with her son. As she was wandering around, she bumped into Yunjian. Hua Yun thought that Yunjian wouldn't come to the amusement park just to mock her, right? Therefore, Hua Yun held her son, Hu Qixiang's hand, and walked over with big steps. After all, Hua Yun was from a wealthy family. After marrying Hu Chaochuan, she felt that her husband was very powerful. Therefore, she valued her cultivation even more. Hua Yun walked over and looked down at Yunjian. She was wearing a pair of high heels, so she looked much taller than Yunjian. I can't believe you guys are here. Hua Yun spoke as if Yunjian and the others were not supposed to be here. If you can come, why can't I? Yunjian was not the kind of person who would run away. She looked straight at Hua Yun. Hua Yun was slightly taller than Yunjian. Now that she was wearing high heels, it could be said that Hua Yun was looking down at Yunjian. However, Yunjian stood on the same spot. She did not look up at Hua Yun. Instead, she looked straight at Hua Yun, who was a few meters away. In terms of aura, even though Hua Yun's height was slightly taller than Yunjian, who was wearing flat shoes, Yunjian was stronger than Hua Yun in terms of aura and behavior. It was also because of this that Hua Yun hated Yunjian even more. Because this is my house. Mom doesn't like you guys coming here. I don't like you guys coming here either. So get out of my house. When Hua Yun wanted to say something, her son with a flat nose, Hu Qixiang, who was holding her hand, took the right to speak. As soon as Hu Qixiang spoke, Yunjian felt it. He was a typical example of being spoiled by Hua Yun and Hu Chaochuan. Chapter 10:25. Hu Qixiang had been instilled with the idea that his father was very powerful since he was young. Before he came to the amusement park, Hu Qixiang already knew that his father was one of the investors here. He was only one of the investors, but in Hu Qixiang's mind, this amusement park belonged to his father. Everything here belonged to his family. He could decide who could come and who could not. Even the people who bought tickets to enter could scram out of here if they made him unhappy. That was the idea that Hua Yun instilled in Hu Qixiang. Hua Yun thought the same way too. Although Hu Chaochuan was only one of the investors here, Hua Yun felt that everything here belonged to her family. With such thoughts in mind, Hua Yun often wandered around here when she had nothing to do. She felt that she was superior to everyone else as long as she stood here. This feeling drove Hua Yun crazy. "Give it to me," Yun Jian only smiled contemptuously. She did not want to fight for anything. Instead, she reached out her hand to Hua Yun. "What?" Hua Yun was shocked by Yun Jian's action. She felt that her son, Hu Qixiang, was especially cool when he told Yun Jian to get out of here because this was her family's territory. He was indeed her son. He knew how to help his mother deal with bad people. "Refund the tickets. It's the tickets for the 5 of us. Didn't you want us to leave? We were kicked out before we finished playing. Of course, you have to give us a refund." Yun Jian did not care about other things. Instead, she reached out her hand and asked Hua Yun to give her a refund. Hua Yun was shocked by Yun Jian's action. Wasn't Yun Jian very domineering before? How come today? Why should I give you guys a refund? Hua Yun was infuriated by Yun Jian's bluff. Hua Yun did not lack Yun Jian's ticket money. In fact, the ticket money was nothing to Hua Yun. It was no different from the dust on the ground. However, if Hua Yun really refunded Yun Jian's ticket money on the spot, wouldn't it be very embarrassing? "Because we bought tickets and we haven't had enough fun yet. If you want us to leave, of course we'll ask for a refund," Yun Jian said smoothly. "But since you can't give us a refund, we can only continue with the game," Yun Jian continued without waiting for Hua Yun to speak. At this point, Yun Jian called out to Xiao Yunzhu, Duan Li, and Duan Ya. "Xiao Zhu, you 3 follow Ce Gij to the boat first." Ce didn't appear, but he was watching everything that was happening in front of him. He knew that there were some things that Yun Jian could solve by herself. If she couldn't solve it cleanly, then he would come and clean it up. Ce quickly grabbed Xiao Yunzhu and the other 2 as if they were chickens and entered the pedal boat. "Heh, Qixiang, let's go." Hua Yun knew that she could not argue with Yun Jian. She gritted her teeth in anger, but after considering her appearance, she dragged Hu Qixiang away. "Just you wait." It was going to be Qin Yiru and Gu Yunjian's wedding soon. At that time, she, Hua Yun, would show Yun Jian how rich she was. Compared to her, Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru's family wealth was nothing. Hua Yun wanted to show off at Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru's wedding. She also wanted her ex-husband to see that the husband she found now was not only richer than him, but more importantly, he also knew how to dote on her. Chapter 10:26. Just as they got on the boat, Yun Zhu and Duan Li snatched the pedals with their tiny feet and stepped on them, having a great time. Ce's long legs were pressed against Xiao Yunzhu's. Just as he carried Xiao Yunzhu and the other 2 onto the boat, Yun Jian nimbly walked into the boat from the shore. Since Hua Yun had left on her own, Yun Jian naturally did not ask her to stay, nor did she say anything. Because it was not the right time yet, she would let Hua Yun be smug for a few more days. Yun Jian would never let anyone who belittled her mother off the hook. Reality had proven that Hua Yun had successfully angered her. As for the next step, she would make Hua Yun pay the price for angering her. Of course, Yun Jian planned to give Hua Yun a heavy blow while preparing a grand wedding for Qin Yiru. Just as Yun Jian thought of this, she had already stepped on the pedals and walked into the boat. The boat was not big and could only seat 4 people. They sat opposite each other in pairs. Xiao Yunzhu, Duan Li, and Duan Li each took 3 seats. Xiao Yunzhu and Duan Li sat opposite each other, while Duan Ya sat beside Ce. When Yun Jian walked in, there were no more seats. "Xiao Ya, let me carry you." When Yun Jian saw this, she planned to walk towards Duan Ya. She even reached out her hand as she spoke. When Yun Jian walked in, she happened to pass by Ce. Just as she reached out her hand to carry Duan Ya to sit on her lap, Ce suddenly reached out and pulled Yun Jian over. When Yun Jian was scooped up by Ce like that, the force of his scooping was strong because she was standing in the corridor. It was as if he brought her over directly. Hence, when Yun Jian was pulled over, she lost her balance and sat on Ce's lap. Yun Jian was suddenly pulled onto Ce's lap. Her butt was suddenly pressed against Ce. At that moment, she could even feel a certain part of Ce's body expanding and pressing against her indescribable part. Yun Jian's face flushed red, especially when Xiao Yunju and the other two were still having fun and did not notice what was happening. It felt as if she was having an affair with Ce. Xiao Yunju and the other two were having fun stepping on the pedals and did not notice the shocking scene of Yun Jian sitting on Ce's lap. In front of the three children, Yun Jian was blushing. She struggled but was held down by Ce. When Yun Jian struggled, a certain part of the girl's body was pressed against a certain part of his, rubbing left and right. Ce nearly could not hold himself back. Xiao Jian, don't move. Ce's fair and slender hand was placed on Yun Jian's beautiful thighs. Yun Jian was wearing a pair of shorts that ended just below her knees today. Due to the hot weather, her pants were thin. Ce's hand was on her thighs and a certain part of his body was pressed against her. Yun Jian felt like she had never encountered anything more exciting than today in her entire life. Especially when there were three little kids playing around them. When they got off the boat, Yun Jian's legs were still trembling. She admitted that she did not struggle when they were on the boat just now, but she dared not exert all her weight on Ce's thighs. Especially when her lower body was pressed against him. It was almost 7 in the evening when they got off the boat. Yun Jian planned to bring Xiao Yunju and the other two home. Just as they stepped out of the amusement park, Yun Jian saw that Ce had sent a Mo-sen to pick them up. Once they were in the car, Yun Jian saw Ce calling Snow Eagle. Chapter 10:27. Once Ce was done, Snow Eagle did not know what was going on, but it had always obeyed Ce's orders. Ce hung up right after Xueqi agreed. Yun Jian, who was in the car, narrowed her eyes, knowing that Ce was taking revenge for her. Destroying the amusement park's investor shares was the same as destroying the new project that Hua Yun's husband's company had recently launched. It would at least cause Hua Yun's husband to lose a huge sum of money. It was not enough to ruin his reputation, but it would be enough to give him a headache in the near future. Mo-sen drove steadily. Xiao Yunju, Duanling Tian, and Duanling Tian seemed to be tired from playing in the car. The three of them seemed to have infected each other as they dozed off in the car at the same time. Yun Jian knew that the three of them must be tired from playing today, so she let Ce help her to rest Xiao Yunju's head while she rested her head on Duanli and Duanya's. When they got home, Yun Jian moved Xiao Yunju, Duanling Tian, and Duanling Tian back to their respective bedrooms. Yun Jian was exhausted after playing for the entire afternoon and night. It was only 8 o'clock when she got home. Although she had to wake up for school the next day, Yun Jian was in no hurry to sleep. On the other hand, Hua Yun brought her son, Hu Qixiang, home in a huff and shoved her son to the nanny in exasperation. She was so infuriated by Yun Jian that she did not even bother to look at her son as she stomped upstairs. Before Hua Yun entered her husband's study, she heard him talking to someone on his phone. Hu Chaochuan's tone was extreme. What? Someone important is messing with us. Explain it to me. What do you mean the amusement park plan is going to be ruined? I've invested 1 billion yuan in Longmen City's amusement park. How can it be gone just like that? Find out who did it for me. After shouting his last words, Hu Chaochuan threw his phone away. From the ferocious expression on Hu Chaochuan's face, one could tell that he was in a very bad mood. In 1999, 1 billion was equivalent to half of Hu Chaochuan's family fortune. The project that he had just invested in was suddenly hacked. Moreover, this project had cost all of Hu Chaochuan's efforts. Hu Chaochuan's expression at this moment was simply uglier than if he had eaten dog shit. It was true that Hua Yun was a graceful and elegant woman. However, Hua Yun was not smart. Even though she could see that Hu Chaochuan's face was terrifyingly dark, she still wanted to approach him. Hubby, what's wrong? Why were you so angry just now? Hua Yun gently brought a fruit platter from downstairs and leaned over. Just as she walked over and placed the fruit platter in front of Hu Chaochuan pushed it away. The fruits in the fruit platter rolled to the ground and slid far away. Scram! Did I tell you to come up? On the surface, Hu Chaochuan appeared to be very gentle to Hua Yun. However, if he really encountered something difficult, he would simply treat Hua Yun as a punching bag. Hua Yun felt that the only thing she could brag about in this life was marrying a rich husband like Hu Chaochuan. Hua Yun wanted to pretend to be a very virtuous wife in front of Hu Chaochuan, so she went to Hu Chaochuan even after she was scolded. Chaochuan, what's wrong with you? Is there something wrong with your business? It's all right. I'm here with you. Before Hua Yun could finish her sentence, Hu Chaochuan pushed her away. Hu Chaochuan, who had called Hua Yun baby in front of Yun Jian before, did not even treat Hua Yun as a human when he was frustrated. Chapter 10:28. As Hu Chaochuan spoke, he glared at Hua Yun. His behavior was a stark contrast to Hu Chaochuan, who called Hua Yun baby in front of outsiders. Even so, Hua Yun was not mad at all. Because Hu Chaochuan was her ATM. If she left Hu Chaochuan now, she was nothing. F***CK. Hu Chaochuan growled and slammed all the books on the desk onto the floor. With this slap, a few books hit Hua Yun's body. One of the books even hit Hua Yun's forehead hard, causing a big bump to form on the spot. Hua Yun clenched her teeth in pain, but she dared not utter a word in the end. The only thing she had left was Hu Chaochuan, because Hu Chaochuan's money was the only thing she could show off in front of outsiders. Therefore, Hua Yun could only endure Hu Chaochuan's violence at home and be an envied rich lady outside. This was Hua Yun's current living situation. The next day, Yun Jian went to school as usual. Once the 3-day holiday of Labor Day was over, Yun Jian's life returned to normal. The 3-day holiday of Labor Day could be considered Yun Jian's last long break in junior high school. Once May was over, the senior high school entrance examination would begin in late June. What awaited everyone in the end was the yearning high school life. As for what kind of school they could get into and which school they would go to, it all depended on the senior high school entrance examination in late June. Jian. Sob. I'm getting moldy at home. I can finally go back to school and stay with you every day. I'm so excited. Just as Yun Jian returned to school, Chen Sini pounced on her. Yun Jian did not avoid her but allowed Chen Sini to hug her. Chen Sini was finally back to school after recuperating at home for so long. To be honest, Chen Sini was the person whom Yun Jian and her friends were looking forward to the most in school. Initially, she thought that she would not be able to meet any other friends other than Lu Fian after leaving Xinjiang town, but she did not expect to meet Chen Sini. There was also Zhang Xiaofeng and the rest. Let go, it's time for class. Although she was a little emotional, Yun Jian pressed her lips together and told Chen Sini nonchalantly. Hee, I see. I know you're excited too, Jian. Chen Sini hugged Yun Jian's hand coquettishly. It was only when the morning bell rang that Chen Sini let go of Yun Jian's hand. There was a night self-study session on Tuesday. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. In addition, Yun Jian and the girls were about to take their high school entrance exams, so the evening self-study session was usually dragged to class by the respective subject teachers. In the end, it would even drag on for more than 10 minutes. By the time school was over, most of the day and boarding students from the other grades had already left. Zhang Xiaofeng still had to go to the field for some exercise after the evening self-study session, so Yun Jian and Chen Sini walked out of the school gate first. The night breeze was rather chilly. Chen Sini stayed by Yun Jian's side, holding Yun Jian's hand as they turned a corner to go home. Just as they turned the corner, Yun Jian felt that something was off. Ha bros, it's this chick's boyfriend who kicked me hard at the amusement park yesterday. Yun Jian recognized the leader of a group of people who were walking toward them at first glance. The leader was Yang Katie's boyfriend, Yu Hui, who refused to apologize for stepping on Duan Li yesterday. Currently, Yu Hui was leading a group of more than 20 teenagers with Yang Kai-dai in his arms. There were also some teenagers who came to watch the show, surrounding Yun Jian and Chen Sini. From the looks of it, it was obvious that Yu Hui and his men were here to cause trouble. Chapter 10:29. Yu Hui was indeed here to cause trouble. After being kicked by CE yesterday, he felt like his internal organs were about to be destroyed. To Yu Hui, he had never suffered such humiliation in his life. However, considering that CE was too strong, he took his girlfriend, Yang Kai-dai, and ran away first. If he couldn't win, he would run away. This was Yu Hui's habit. Of course, he buried yesterday's incident in his heart. After being kicked so ruthlessly, how could Yu Hui let it go? Luckily, Yu Hui asked his brothers to investigate and finally found out that Yun Jian was studying at Longmen Yizhong High School. Yu Hui was amazed at how powerful his influence was. He was actually able to find Yun Jian's school in such a short period of time. At the same time, he didn't forget how Yun Jian dealt with Yang Kai-dai yesterday. It seemed like this girl had some skills too. Hence, Yu Hui took advantage of the fact that Ce wasn't around today to bring his 20 brothers and planned to intercept Yun Jian here. 20 people against one girl. He didn't believe that they would lose. Yu Hui's group of school hooligans, if they were bullied by anyone, even if it was just a little bit, they would make a big fuss out of it, as if they were going to die. Today, Yu Hui brought 20 people to surround Yun Jian and teach her a lesson. Yo, Yu Hui, I didn't expect these two girls to be so pretty. Haha. The group of 20 hooligans surrounded Yun Jian and Chen Sini in a corner. One of them was dressed like a hooligan and had a yellow mohawk hairstyle. He sized up Yun Jian and Chen Sini from the corner of his eyes. He looked as if he wanted to see Yun Jian and Chen Sini naked. Brother Haitian, it was this damned woman who framed me yesterday. She even slapped my beautiful face until it was swollen. You have to take revenge for your younger sister. Yang Kai-dai also stood up and covered her face as she spoke. Looking at Yang Katie's pitiful expression, it was as if she was really the victim. The brother Hai Tian that Yang Kai-dai mentioned was the young man with the yellow mohawk. The young man's name was Wang Haitian, and he was the most powerful one among the 20 or so punks. Yang Kai-dai also got to know this group of gangsters who she thought were very powerful because she was dating Yu Hui. It was also because of this group of people that Yang Kai-dai was so arrogant to the outside world. That was because she felt that she had a backer. Hee, they actually dared to bully our little sister Kai-dai. Of course I will help you teach them a lesson. Wang Haitian walked up to Yun Jian and Chen Sini like a ruffian and sized them up with narrowed eyes. Not only were the 20 over brothers that Yu Hui had brought with him, there were also some people who came to watch the show after hearing that there was going to be a gang fight. The people around them were mostly students. However, when they saw Yun Jian being surrounded by Wang Haitian, Yu Hui and the rest, they all shook their heads and sighed. It seemed like the two girls who were surrounded were done for today. The students around them were not from Yun Jian's school, but from Wang Haitian and Yu Hui's school. Therefore, none of them knew that Yun Jian was Team Monarch slashing God. At that moment, Wang Haitian was looking at Yun Jian's voluptuous breasts with perverted eyes. So beautiful! There was actually such a beautiful girl in this world. Little girl, are you scared? Hee, if you let me touch your breasts, I'll let you go. How about that? Wang Haitian put forward such shameless words. As he spoke, he even whistled, pretending to be very domineering. How do you want to die? Chapter 10:30. The people standing around had thought that Yun Jian would beg for mercy, lose her face from fright, or hug Chen Sini in fright and cry out what to do. This was how a normal girl would react when faced with such a situation. But what about Yun Jian? She didn't follow Wang Haitian's words. Instead, she asked Wang Haitian, "How do you want to die?" Are you kidding me? The current situation was that Yun Jian was surrounded by Yu Hui, Wang Haitian, and the rest, and they were about to gang up on her. She was a girl, but not only was she not afraid, she even looked at Wang Haitian and the rest and said such words. Wasn't this asking for death? It was fine if Yun Jian wasn't afraid, but why didn't the girl standing beside Yun Jian have any sense of fear? Chen Sini was standing beside Yun Jian, but just like Yun Jian, she didn't show any signs of fear in front of Wang Haitian and the rest. Hey, little girl, don't try to be brave. You won't die if I touch you. I'll touch you gently, and I'll let you go after that. How about that? Wang Haitian was mesmerized by Yun Jian's beauty, and he didn't even have the intention to avenge Yu Hui and Yang Kai-dai. At this moment, his entire heart was on Yun Jian. Such a beauty made him want to conquer her from the bottom of his heart. Wang Haitian, I was the one who found this beauty. Why are you the only one who can touch her? Yu Hui saw that Wang Haitian wanted to monopolize Yun Jian, and he panicked. He didn't even care about his own girlfriend, and opened his mouth to say these words. Yu Hui's words made Yang Katie's eyes widen. Yu Hui, you actually had this kind of idea. You even said that you're going to avenge me tonight, you. Don't, my baby. I'm torturing her because I want to avenge you. Yu Hui realized that he had said something wrong and he immediately changed his words. Although Yu Hui's explanation was rather far-fetched, Yang Kai-dai turned around unhappily and pouted her lips. After making an angry face, she didn't say anything else. It was only then that Xueqi turned his attention back to Yun Jian. Just as Xueqi turned his head around, he suddenly heard the surrounding students exclaim in surprise. "Oh my god, this girl, she actually carries a knife with her." Xueqi's attention was attracted by the noise. He turned around in surprise and saw Yun Jian pulling out a butterfly knife from her pocket. With a swift flick of her hand, the butterfly knife was caught in Yun Jian's palm. Seeing Yun Jian's proficient posture with a knife, everyone present was slightly stunned. In the next second, they heard Yun Jian's lips curl up. Her red lips moved up and down slightly, and the hand holding the butterfly knife tightened. Then, she pointed the blade of the butterfly knife at Wang Haitian and the others. "Don't talk nonsense. You want to gang up on me, right? Get your weapons and come at me together. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you bunch of trash." The moment Yun Jian whipped out the butterfly knife was enough to send chills down people's spines. After all, she was a girl. How could she carry a knife with her? However, when Yun Jian finished speaking, the group of people led by Wang Haitian were dumbfounded. What did this girl say? She wanted all of them to come at her together? She even said that they were trash? Could it be that she wanted to fight with them all by herself? Was this a joke? Just her alone? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.